In this video, I'm going to show you how to write a parser for quoted strings. So a quoted string is the way we write strings in most programming languages. So generally they start with a double quote, then it's a sequence of 0 or more characters, and then a closing double quote. And the thing that makes this a little bit complicated is if we want to write strings that actually have double quotes inside them, then we need to write them by escaping them. So we start with a double quote, then we have some characters, then we have a backslash before we write a double quote. So this double quote isn't interpreted as the end of the string. And then we end the string with a double quote itself. So let's do this using our parser combinators by starting from the bottom up. So what we're going to do is write a parser for the individual characters within a string. Then we're going to parse 0 or more of those with a double quote at the start and a double quote at the end. So let's first write a parser for the characters within a string. An important thing to remember here is that most of the characters stand for themselves. So if we see an H in the string, then that stands for an H in the final string. The exception is when we see a backslash. If we see a backslash, then really it's standing for the next character in the string. So let's take our string char parser. So this is going to be a parser which returns characters. So we're going to do this by reading in a character. So we read a character. And now we're going to do a case to see what character this is. If it's a double quote, then that is not the sort of character that can appear in a string. So in that case, the parser will fail. And then control will be passed to another parser which will be able to handle it. If, on the other hand, we get a backslash, so we have to escape this backslash itself to be able to write this in Haskell by writing it twice, then what we're going to do is take the next character and return that literally as the character we've parsed. So we do char and then return that character. Otherwise, if it's any other character, so for example the T and the H and the I, then we just return that character. So now let's test this. So we're going to do run parser string character. If we give it a string which starts with something, then we're going to get that A returned. However, if we give it a string that's got a quote mark at the start, and now remember that when we're writing this in Haskell, we have to escape it to get a string which has a quote mark in it, then it will fail because this string starts with a quote mark. However, if we escape this quote mark, and now we have to write this using a double backslash to get a backslash, and then a backslash to get a quote mark, then it's going to return just the character quote. Now we can use this to write a quoted string parser that would just parses in quoted strings. So what does a quoted string parser do? Well, as I said, we look for a double quote at the start. Then we make a string from 0 or more string characters, and then we look for a double quote at the end. And finally we return the string we parsed. So now let's try this. So we run the parser for quoted strings. Let's try and run it on this input, and then it fails because this input didn't start with a quote mark. However, if we try it with start with a quote mark, this is our quoted string literal, then it returns with no left or input, this is a quoted string literal. So it's recognized that there is a quote mark at the start, then a sequence of literal characters, and a quote mark at the end. And then we can test to see whether it parses escaped characters correctly. So now we have to escape it twice to get Haskell to understand it properly. So now we get this is a quoted string literal. So now we can see again, just as with the number example, that we've got enough functions in our parser combinator library to build up yet more complicated parsers. So now we can parse numbers and strings. In the next video, I'll show you how to parse full JSON values.